How's it going, folks? This is Christian with Liberty After Dark, bringing you part two of the Young Bucks episode with Derek and Brian. We go over a lot of fantastic topics in this conversation. I won't spoil all of them, but we talk a lot about foreign policy and its relation to our domestic politics that we have going on right now. And we talk a lot about culture, some history, lots of good tangential conversation going on. This is the longest part of the three of them, but I think there were lots of great things said here. So I hope you guys enjoy. I won't keep you around any longer. Please enjoy the show.
So yeah, Mattis's resignation letter. Basically, I don't know. Trump wasn't happy with it. Did you ever hear about this?
I honestly, Trump is his opinion is like the least of my concern most days. So
True. Well, I was just wondering what the words were. I'm talking about Mattis's resignation letter right now, Derek.
Oh, yeah.
And like how Trump was upset about it. And I read it, and there wasn't even like attacks on Trump. He basically was like, you deserve to have a SecDef that is aligned with your opinions and your views on the world, and that's why I'm resigning.
Policy disagreement, mostly, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was mostly over Syria, right?
Yeah,
he resigned.
I think you're fucking high if you didn't see that one coming.
Yeah,
Mad Dog Mattis. I mean, he's not exactly like the biggest proponent of pulling the military out of conflicts. Just throw that out there,
Well, he did say in the resignation letter that he didn't want the U.S. to be the world police anymore. And
yeah, let's not pull out of Syria. Let's see how fast we stop being the world police at that point.
No, I know.
You think Afghanistan was part of that too?
I mean, we're like pulling out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, to leave.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I know the whole Eastern Theater. Besides us, pretty much. I mean, even us to an extent. But the whole Eastern Theater is like kind of all pissed off right now in the military because they're like, oh man, we had all these like big bombs and everything ready to go, and now we can't drop them on the brown people. Dang it. Yeah. I have a really unpopular opinion with most people that like, I don't think this base should exist, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. And this is probably one of the most justifiable ones. If we were going to keep any of them, I'd say probably this base and maybe a couple others dotted around. But like, I mean, we have like 330 bases internationally that we own like 180 of them or something like that. And like, excuse me, really, really, like,
they're the biggest empire the world's ever known.
Yeah, I always bring up the whole like, imagine if like Russia opened up a base tomorrow outside of your hometown. How do you think the people there would feel? Okay.
Yeah.
If we had nukes in Turkey pointed at them in the Cold War, and they tried to, match that by getting them on Cuba, and we almost bombed them in retaliation. So, like, it's never an easy question of figuring out international relations, but I don't know. I think we do kind of assume we have the moral high ground by default, which in my mind makes you way more prone to like making very grievous mistakes, which I think we've probably done in the last couple decades. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Then after like the Berlin Wall fell, how we had the agreement with Russia that like there wouldn't be any Western aggression towards their border, and then we formed NATO, and then that's basically just the same fucking thing. Yeah. Which, like, I'm not justifying their actions in Ukraine, but I understand it from a military, like, defensive position.
Play devil's advocate. Most of those countries did not consent to having the Iron Curtain brought over them after World War II.
True.
Oh, yeah.
Their choice to join NATO. They wanted that protection. And I think NATO was deformed as a defensive alliance in the case of them expanding west through to the Atlantic, which was a real possibility in 1945, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah. Which that was another thing in his resignation letter. He said something to the effect of China and Russia and their authoritarian governments trying to spread influence, basically, and how obviously Trump's a lot more buddy-buddy with Russia than we've been in a long, long time.
And we still can't strike any deals with them. So I mean, what's it for? But sorry, I'll let you keep going.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was just gonna say, like, it's fine to cooperate with like Russia and China on international agreements, but I feel like what Trump's doing is just sucking up to them.
Hmm.
Like you don't need to praise the style of an authoritarian to like get things done with them, which to some extent I've been kind of upset with the way he's handled that with Kim Jong Un, which maybe that's the only way you can get him to listen to you is by flattering him, but
appeal to his authority complex.
yeah, like that's just maybe not the best way to do it. It's not a good precedent to set as a leader of the free world. Like, why go down that route?
Yeah, especially when both of them. Well, obviously they're a little different, but obviously Putin clearly rigs elections and kills politicians who get in his way. And then Kim Jong Un obviously fucking enslaves people and kills his own people.
Russia's like a walking humanitarian crisis. Pretty much all three of them are, honestly. It's rough. North Korea, Russia, China, I think are three of some of the largest. I mean, obviously we can throw in the Middle East and put like half of that in there too for human rights violators. But you know, as far as like superpowers are concerned, you know, I don't know if you can. I wouldn't consider North Korea a superpower, but they got nukes, so.
Well, they're nuclear power, so
Yeah.
they have to be talked about.
Exactly.
Fortunately.
If they didn't have nukes, none of this would be a fucking problem. You know?
Yeah. Like the amount of artillery pieces they have pointed at Saul, that makes them worth talking about. But nonetheless, like the war would be over in like a week from a military standpoint,
Yeah.
if that. But yeah, you throw a nuke into the mix, and it's just a whole bunch of unanswerable questions.
Yeah.
We always joke. THAAD has like a 33% success rate here, the anti-missile defense system. So we always joke like no one knows how many nukes North Korea has and everything, or how many they have like ready to go. We suspect they have a couple short range that are just ready to go, but small payloads. And we always joke like however many land and go off, you just add a third, and that's how many they had. So
Subtract a third, you mean?
no, so if like 4 land, you add a third, so you had 6. Or well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's the 2/3 of the equation. So.
Yeah.
It's
That
just-
many got through.
Yeah. It's
You were talking about new subjects to bring up. Actually, this one's pretty fresh. I don't know if you heard about India and Pakistan.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've been trying to talk to people about that, and they're like, "Oh, that's cool." I'm like, just like 2 nuclear powers on the brink of war.
It could be the most consequential issue, like, if things get worse. I guess it's barely making a blip on news headlines, but if that goes, I don't know, if it escalates further, those are 2 nuclear powers with one having over 1 billion people in them and a massive economy, and like those are very potentially disastrous things about to happen. But I hope it doesn't escalate, but they've just had a lot of animosity towards each other for the better part of the last century.
Yeah, I was about to say like 100 years. It's that is a tough one because it's hard for us to like come in and say, okay, you guys stop shooting each other now. Like obviously we could try, but I think it was 2012 was whenever the last time something like this happened. Whenever I think it was a Pakistan or an Indian aircraft went down in Pakistan, and they like took the pilot, and they like beat the shit out of him and all that stuff. And India was like, "Oh, we're gonna blow you guys up for this," and nothing ever happened. But now we have like military on military engagements happening, which is a way bigger deal.
Because isn't it disputed territory, the Kashmir region?
Yeah, it's all disputed territory.
And I think India's had de facto autonomy there for a while, but I think there's a strong subset of people there that want to be a part of Pakistan, so there's been a lot of rebellion. And I was even reading recently there was a suicide bombing that killed dozens of people committed by someone who I don't know, they wanted independence from India. And like these aren't even stories that get coverage, and we've had the context of the war on terror for the last 2 decades, but no one even pays attention when like terrorist attacks happen in other countries. Besides, like if it's Paris, oh, I'll change my profile picture. But if it happens in Anwar, wherever, like I'm not gonna pay attention to it.
Yeah,
But
the
I
main
think
population is brown people. We don't care, basically.
pretty much that's the summary.
It's
But
true.
I mean, and it's a lot of like the terrorism in the last couple decades has affected people in Muslim majority countries, and I don't know. It's not just our fight; like it's civilization's fight in general, really. But it's just, I don't know. It's a mess.
You could
Yeah.
see the border from space of the India-Pakistan border because of the lights. At night there's just a huge
And
line of lights.
North and South Korea too.
Yeah, it's I mean that we're. I think just a lot of people just don't understand the context, really, how long the hostilities have been going on. There's a huge separatist movement that has been just boiling, and you'll get a couple conflicts every now and then, and they protest pretty often, and that gets shut down all the time by India in disputed territory, internationally disputed territory too. It's like there's not even like a good consensus across developed countries who should have it, and it's like the whole Israel,
And
yeah, it's like all of that.
it does go back. It's like you can just keep pointing fingers and keep bringing up grievances, but at the end of the day, like, are you going to sit down at the table and actually work towards peace, or are you just going to not listen to each other and keep making other people's lives miserable? They get caught up in the crossfire.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is a super unpopular opinion, but in the similar vein, I'm not as well. I know India and Pakistan. I'm aware of it. I haven't put as much thought into what I would do because I think really it's either this is a one or another sort of thing. There's no we don't have like a 2-state solution with them or some crap like that. There's not really a middle ground. Yeah,
That's why Pakistan exists in the first place.
exactly, and it obviously didn't fix it.
Yeah. I mean, that was what they were hoping, too, was that, oh, well, we're going to just split up these two countries, but if you're doing it along ethnic and religious lines, like that's almost a recipe for just all sorts of resentment and distrust, and I don't know, all these animosities have just been built up over years, and they've had wars, they've had border skirmishes, but they're also both nuclear powers, so they have a special responsibility on the international stage that they can't shy away from. And I don't know, I think we don't even talk about it enough in America. Like, we're thinking about Afghanistan, like, as if they pose an existential threat to us. Like, those are events that, if a nuke goes off, it has consequences for every human being on the planet. Like, and no one even knows the basic intricacies of what's happening between these two countries. Or North Korea, for that matter, either. Like, that's another example where, like, things are relatively calm, so to speak, but could get blown up tremendously if we fuck up.
Well, kind of going back to North Korea again. I mean, is anyone here really surprised that the talks didn't go through?
No.
Yeah, I
He's
mean,
not going to keep up his arsenal.
I didn't
hopeful.
expect the U.S. diplomats to basically just be like, yeah, we don't like the deal, peace. Like,
Yeah.
I expected them to at least be, I don't know, cordial and like go through the whole process.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure from their perspective it would have looked great, but I think what was on the table was essentially you dismantle your entire arsenal and we'll lift sanctions. And they're like, well, if we get rid of our arsenal, are you going to treat me like Gaddafi? Like,
Yeah, true.
that's pretty much what we're thinking. And I'm not, like, obviously not defending Kim Jong-un, but if you're looking at it from his perspective, like, he's going to take his own self-interest above all else. Like, of course, the sanctions being lifted would be great for his own people. And they'd actually, if they slowly reformed, they could have some progress economically, but
he doesn't give a shit about his people.
it's a hermit kingdom, and it's ruled by a dynasty, and they're only looking out for their bottom line, so it's like, I don't know. I'm just not sure what path we have going forward with diplomacy. It needs to be open, but it's tough.
I put this idea through the ringer as much as I could, trying to just, theory craft whatever situations I can come up with. And it just seems like this is really, it's like either two extremes. nothing happens until one day something has to happen, and that's like the worst case scenario, which I think is honestly the most likely. Or we have the magical $1 billion. Maybe this guy will do it. Maybe the next ruler in 60 years, unless he dies of pancreas cancer or whatever it was too. We either have. It seems like we either have the total assimilation of North Korea and South Korea just to become a Korea again, which is like, you want to talk about like one of the biggest turnarounds in human history. That's probably one of them right there. Or we have a military conflict and then nobody wins. Seoul gets wiped off the face of the earth. Millions of people die in minutes, and then we just sweep up whatever's left and pretend like we can start over after that. Like, you know.
Yeah, and at that point, it's like, was this worth? Like, it's one thing to have the force that we do, but if you just wreck a society, like there is some hope that the regime eventually will, I don't know, introduce reforms, but there's not much. Like,
there's no incentive.
Power by a thread. Like, he had his own uncle executed. Like, he's already paranoid, and probably for good reason. But I wouldn't give up hope on being able to change the society in general. Like, we were able to, if you think about what happened in Japan after World War II, the warrior culture that they had, and the intensity at which they feared and hated Americans and whatnot, like, we were still able to overcome that. And when we occupied Germany, we were able to denazify them. When we occupied Japan, we were able to kind of get rid of that, like, Japanese warrior ethic mentality of, like, die for the emperor. And that was a very real thing. There were people still getting caught on islands in the 70s that thought the war was still happening. Yeah. And that's how firm their beliefs were. So, I don't know, you look at the Germany of today, it's nowhere near what it was in the 30s and 40s. So, like, societies can change, cultures can change, we can hope for the best, but I don't know, right now, like, North Korea is just the perfect example of 1984 in a nutshell. Like, it is absolutely under his control.
Which, yeah, without a lot of bloodshed, how is that, I don't know, how is a good solution going to come about?
I'm not going to say that these talks were the only path to fixing the problem, because obviously that's not true. There are other opportunities, but I would think I would be a liar if I said I genuinely believe that if they had cooperated now, this would have probably been the fastest route to getting through that. And I obviously, like we said before, unless Kim just wants to give up all of his power, which he has no reason to, he's already at rock bottom. He has pretty much nothing to lose at this point besides his life, you know. Then
he loses his country before he loses his life, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, I mean, unless you can't revolt if you're starving, so we can't really rely on the North Korean people to overthrow their government.
No.
So, yeah, if you keep the population so destitute and starving and without any resources to be able to do anything, like they probably don't even have enough farming equipment to even like do a peasants revolt. Like it's not possible, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the possibility that down the road they'll have to do what China did, which is kind of sort of embrace capitalism, but not really embrace it. And
yeah, the free market light is what I call it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And just sort of have one party rule, but at the same time they're forced, like they finally have no choice but to implement some reforms. But whether or not you get the apparatus of an authoritarian state removed that way is yet to be seen. China clearly still has no interest in, you know, opening up their democracy. So we'll see.
It's gross. It's very gross.
I didn't mean to say they have a democracy, by the way, but opening up to a democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of one party rule.
Well, I'm worried about the fate of Hong Kong in the future.
True. I mean, they're kind of a little beacon of hope and an island of oppression, I suppose. Something like that.
I think Hong Kong could start an international crisis because what is it? When does the treaties end for Hong Kong? It's coming up soon. It's in the next couple of years. And someone in China, I think it was what's his name?
Jinping?
Yeah, Jinping made a comment about Hong Kong, about how he's like, oh yeah, it's like it'll be good when we can get Hong Kong back, and that'll be like a part of our national, And everybody in Hong Kong was like, wait,
We
what?
don't want that.
Yeah, right? Like, fuck all that.
We like being in China and having the freedoms that Western cities have.
It's
Yeah.
almost I mean it pretty much is its own fucking country, man.
Practically.
It's run so differently. They don't even they separate the whenever they look on like an income level for like cities, and it's like its own little category because it operates more like, I don't know, like Puerto Rico does for us than like a normal city, if we were to make the comparison.
Yeah. Whereas what, geographically, Hong Kong is not in Taiwan, right? It's part of mainland China.
I think isn't it close? I think it's southern China.
It's an island network. So
Okay.
I mean, that's how Hong Kong started, was because of the whole opium trade, and the British put up a port city on an island. So
It was a British protectorate, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think.
and then they gave it back to China because it was under British control for forever. That's why a lot of people from Hong Kong are Chinese, but they like speak British English.
Really?
They have British
Interesting.
accents and everything. It's kind of whack,
Huh.
but cool at the same time.
That is
Yeah,
such a
it must-
weird.
It's right after, like for us in America. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
exactly.
True. It is such a weird thing that it's like the colonist nations just being like, yeah, you can have this back now. We don't really care about it anymore.
I mean, I think it was the right thing to do.
No, I know. I'm not saying don't do it. It's just kind of weird. Well, yeah, we took this pride militarily at one point, but
Well,
I mean,
especially
most
like
of the
India.
conflict- I think most of the conflicts in the second half of the 20th century are the relics of colonialism.
true.
Vietnam, Cambodia, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, like the list goes on. But
I like the whole
most, really,
I like the whole
True.
butterfly effect idea that, obviously this is hyperbolic, it's supposed to be, but that 9/11 was basically set up for these broken Middle Eastern countries to be put into place by World War One. The action of one man shooting an archduke has set a geopolitical nightmare upon all of us because of the actions, the missteps and actions of leaders throughout decades, and it all started at that one moment.
Have you heard Blueprint for Armageddon from Dan Carlin?
No, I haven't.
He does this podcast called Hardcore History. It's brilliant. You got to check it out. And he talks about exactly what you're talking about. With he has a 5-part series about World War One called Blueprint for Armageddon, and he basically says, like, if you had to pick like the most consequential person in the last 200 years, say something like that, who would you pick? Like Hitler, FDR, you name it. He's like, I'd go with Gavrilo Princip.
Yeah.
Like, he really did set, like, the chain of reaction that happened after that is unbelievable. And yeah, like you're talking about the Middle East and whatnot, those countries territorially get carved up, and you still have the countries today like Saudi Arabia and whatnot that resulted from the British coming in and just deciding who was going to rule and who wasn't after the collapse of the Ottomans. So we're still really much dealing with the ramifications of that.
So obviously,
But
the Ottoman Empire and its ending death throes was a total nightmare. I mean, just look at the Armenian genocide. That's all you have to look at. It was a total nightmare of a country.
Which is something that's never talked about.
Yeah. Oh God.
yeah,
It's actually
we will address it.
it's illegal to talk about in Turkey. You can't talk about it. You will go to jail for talking about the Armenian genocide.
Too, that's like part of their legal system, whereas Germany is like come to grips with their history and has laws against denying what's happened in their country and other countries they occupy.
You still can't show Nazi symbolism though in Germany. Like, I think that's, unless it's educational. Like
Yeah.
what was the big deal was I mean, this has a long history, but in like entertainment and stuff like that, like Man in the High Castle. Man in the High Castle couldn't be shown in Germany. I think they were talking about doing like an exception for it, but they just ended up not, because it has so much Nazi imagery and symbolism in there, and they were like,
I think that's kind of a shame. Like, if anything, it shows you how awful like a fascist government in America would be.
Yeah,
Like,
I think it's a great
why
show.
wouldn't you want that? And then there's like little things like Call of Duty World War II.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Like, so you're just denying that history happened? Like, that's still a symbol that people remember, like, for good reason. It inspired a lot of terror in people's minds. You can't just pretend it didn't happen.
We don't need to forget it. That's for damn sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Forgetting history is the easiest way to
Make the same mistake, yeah.
So
Yeah, and that was so silly with the Call of Duty situation where it was like they just replaced the swastikas with the
Black Cross, the Iron Cross.
yeah.
which they had that since like I don't know, like the 1800s or something, right?
Since the formation of Germany, it was an Austrian symbol before that.
Yeah.
The Wehrmacht. That was the symbol for the Wehrmacht. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm-
I agree with that point though about World War One. Definitely, like all national barriers and political consequences and like all the different issues we've had from the early part of the 20th century through to the 21st can be tied directly to that event.
North Korea, man. World War One sparked off, was essentially the catalyst that Russia needed to embrace the Bolshevik revolutions, and
Japan became an empire.
yeah, Japan became an empire, and then through the influence of communism and China, North Korea was put up as a puppet state. I mean, it's just like it's what's
Domino.
it's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever it is, like 7 degrees of Gorilla
Six
Princip.
degrees,
Or-
6 degrees of separation, Kevin
Yeah.
Bacon. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so
we're,
it's true though. I mean,
we're hopelessly interconnected.
and you know, if there's always going to be some kind of event that people look back to, that you can look at it as sort of like eras throughout human history. Like the end of the Middle Ages, as opposed to a bad event, was started by a good event, the Renaissance. And everything that came out of that was a byproduct of the Renaissance era. It may have taken a few hundred years to really get rolling, but pre-internet, we'll cut them a break. But
They couldn't make a Facebook group then. But
yeah, exactly. They couldn't do podcasts. That was their issue.
Let's storm the Bastille at 10 o'clock. Come on, guys.
I'm going.
Right.
Oh God, Sir Robert puts maybe.
Yeah.
Crusades too. Crusades also are super. Especially the first 3. I know there's like 11, 12.
Not sure, to be honest.
But
We might need to keep track of.
yeah, the first 3 were the ones that mattered because that was when like actual territory was exchanged and like if for some reason people think Hitler hating the Jews was like a new thing. I don't think people realized that like while the Crusades were going to fight some Turks, they were like, oh dude, there's like some Jews here. Let's like kill them and take their stuff and then we'll go to Turkey.
Well, you wouldn't have had
I
the
didn't realize that.
baptism in Europe that you'd had if you didn't have centuries of it. And not to throw Christianity under the bus, but they played some part in that. And like there were pogroms in Russia too under the monarchy. Like they were all sorts of messed up things. They were just the scapegoat of history. And like it is kind of insane that it got to that point where it did in World War II, where like average citizens who just happened to be Jewish were implicated in some mass conspiracy as being part of like the rise of Bolshevism or fucking Germany losing in World War One. Like I don't know. It's just a tragedy. There's no other way to look at the 20th century other than mostly tragic, but some good stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, ended up coming out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the science of the 20th century. God, that's so amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm horrified by it, but
True.
like cured smallpox. Also got the ability to wipe a city off the map.
Weaponized
Yeah.
smallpox. Yeah.
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 But it just tells you the power of science and the importance of it.
Yeah, in events like war, we're creating the necessity for invention.
Yeah,
And it
radar
drives.
technology, fans, fucking.
And then,
ballistic missile.
yeah, and then the
Like-
Nazis deal with the aliens. I mean,
Yeah.
they really stepped up.
Didn't they make a movie about that? Like
Nazis
the
in
Nazis
space.
went to the moon or some shit. And,
They're zombies.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's pretty great.
There's honestly really a lot of interesting lore with like the Nazi regime.
They were really
Yeah.
big into the occult. I think that just
Because
made
they're
them.
like the embodiment of evil, and
Yeah.
so it's like the default bad guy in every video game ever. And Nazi zombies, World at War, classic middle school times.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Kino
then,
der Toten, bro.
I forget who was talking about like SS soldiers, how they were like, what was it? Well, it might have been the Alex Jones, Joe Rogan podcast where they were saying how like similar to, I think it's Israeli special forces do, where they like raise a rabbit or a cat from like a kitten or a baby, and then they have to like murder it at the end because like they have to show that like they can kill something they love for like the greater, I don't know, purpose of the regime.
No
That's some
remorse.
cool shit. That's
Yeah.
some real cool.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like Spartan, like, you know,
Oh yeah.
just the pure war culture.
Oh man. I mean, you get all that stuff though.
There was like a story of some Spartan general who was like going off to war, and he was talking to his wife, and she's like, "What can I do to like make you happy while I'm gone?" He's like, "Make more kids to die for Sparta," or something like that.
God damn.
Savage.
Those
But that's kind of just the, I don't know, ancient culture.
Mentality. Yeah. Yeah, that's
whack.
crazy.
it's whack. The whole Nazi thing is, you know, I can't believe I was ignorant to the fact of how many of these leaders of, I wouldn't say necessarily leaders, but higher officials in Nazi Germany escaped to places like South America.
Yeah.
I had no fucking idea, you know.
Yeah, where did you first hear that? I first heard it from Tim Kennedy being on Joe Rogan's podcast.
show, how he did that investigation about it, found
There
the
was-
the
I think
hospital.
there was one of them that got like hunted down by Mossad, like the Israeli special forces. I think it might have been in South America. I forget where.
A
But,
lot
like,
of them fled there.
basically they escaped crimes against humanity, like with the Nuremberg trials and whatnot, and just I don't know how they fucking got out of like occupied territory, but
Must have just
Crazy.
been a back door that they had planned probably since the beginning.
It's all conspiracies, but there's like implications with like the Vatican pulling resources to get people out because, you know, the Catholic Church and the Nazis were like,
Oh.
yeah, I mean they did. I think they rung the bells in the Vatican on Hitler's birthday.
yeah.
The inconvenient fact about fascism was that it was allied with the Christian right in Europe, which Mussolini definitely helped speed that up. But
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Good thing he was a shit leader though.
Yeah, right?
yeah,
Fucking Italy.
clock no game.
Yeah.
He made the trains run on time, just his time, you know. Definitely not the scheduled time.
Yeah,
He's like, "What do you mean? It was supposed to be 10 hours late. I told them to be 10 hours."
yeah. He kicked his ass and thought he was cool, and then realized that he had no actual power.
Running a country's hard.
Yeah,
And then they just like pretty much immediately capitulated after they lost like 10 ships. They're like, "Oh no."
Didn't the German military just take over?
Yeah.
Like after the Italians started losing and the Allies were making progress in Northern Africa, they're like, okay, like we've been fighting for the last half century, like we'll step in and actually take over theirs.
That was when Rommel went into Northern Africa, the Desert Fox. Probably one of my favorite generals in world history.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, that's one theater that's never really, I don't know, that's not covered nearly as much.
Northern Africa? Those are some
Yeah.
cool. I mean, obviously it's all terrible. Preface. all
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah, no, of course, but
Some really cool battles happened in Northern Africa.
yeah, like the massive tank battles.
too, because it kind of, I feel like if we hadn't learned the harsh lessons we learned in North Africa, we wouldn't have been ready for D-Day, let alone invading into mainland Germany.
I mean,
True.
and we were up against like the leading military mind in Germany. Granted, he was pretty hamstrung, but like, I mean, I don't know how well versed you guys are in World War II, but like they were given all of these anti-air emplacements, and we didn't have a huge air force in Northern Africa. It was like just enough to get by, basically. So they were pretty much all useless. They were given a shit ton of anti-air because they expected us to have this huge like bombing campaign in the desert for some reason, and so he was like, well, can they shoot straight? And everyone was like, I mean, I guess so. So they just took the guns and aimed them forward, and nobody had ever thought to use that. And they swapped out they got just solid slugs and were using them to shoot tanks. And they
Instead
were
of flak.
yeah, they were fantastic anti-tank weapons. And it like totally threw us for a loop. Nobody saw it coming. They were like, oh my God, they shot the guns at us. Like, wow. You know? Why didn't we think of that? You know?
Right.
That's the thing about like World War One, I think in particular, but also World War II for sure, is that the evolution of warfare changed so rapidly. Like in that podcast I mentioned, the Blueprint for Armageddon, like most of us just think of World War One as like a pretty clear cut stalemate. Like you're on your trench, I'm in my trench, and we're shooting machine guns at each other and massive artillery barrages and whatnot.
And
it was like they were trying a lot of different tactics, like the creeping barrage, and they were doing landings like Gallipoli and employing like aerial reconnaissance and even the first versions of tanks and whatnot. And things changed so quickly on the battlefield, and like the technological leaps that were made were just so drastic and so essential to actually like ultimately winning in World War II. But I don't know, it's just crazy like how often that gets overlooked.
Yeah, war's a great motivator for change. I hate it, but it's true.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I'm glad we like code breaking even in World War II.
True.
Like,
what's
that
the
was
movie
huge.
called with
It's fuck.
the Enigma machine? Is it called the Enigma Protocol?
No, it's
it was
I know it's
well, they
Benedict.
didn't put what it was, but I'm blanking on that.
Yeah, me too. It's got what's his face in there, Doctor
Benedict
Strange.
Cumberbatch.
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like he fucking breaks Nazi code, and then it's like, wait, you're gay though? Like, like what? It's like, oh, that's a fucking problem now. What? Like, yeah,
That's so fucked up. A guy who almost single-handedly like probably saved the Allied efforts was just, cast aside at the end of the war. When he changed history forever and for the better, like he essentially created the precursor to the computer too, and like all the technological wonders that came from that, like the guy just gets thrown under the bus because of his sexuality. Like that's awful.
yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the human rights of the 20th century were, I mean, for the past, 4,000 years of humans existing, it's not been, well, actually, since we've existed, it's not been so great. But, recorded history onward, it's been pretty shit, if we're going to be honest with each other. So,
Yeah, which
There's reasons for optimism, but also reasons for pessimism. But
if we're just
gotta
looking back,
yeah.
I was having a conversation with someone the other day. Oh, sorry. You can.
No, I was just going to say that the 20th century is filled with so many examples of just like how awful humans can be to each other, but also the best of our humanity at the same time. So
Yeah.
got to keep fighting the good fight, I suppose.
Yeah. So we can kind of segue, since we're talking about homosexuality now. We can lightly talk on the whole Methodist church and their convention that they have. I don't think it's going to go quite down like the Convention at Nicaea or anything like that, but it was a pretty big deal if you're Methodist. And I was having a conversation with someone who was like, "This is terrible. Like, how could they do this? Blah blah blah. Hateful bigots." And I'm like, "Okay, yes, all right, we can all agree. Like, I think that's a very antiquated way of doing things." But I had 2 points. I was like, first off, I was like, we have It's in their fucking book. Like, we can't say it's not. It's in their book multiple times. Like, don't be gay. Okay, so you're gonna have a hard time convincing people who are pretty by the book that they can't do what their book says. So, also, I was saying that it's not like they're excommunicating anybody. No one's like, if you're gay, you can't come to church. God's not going to save you, all that stuff. It just had to do with like clergy and things like that, which I can understand. It's their organization. It's their creed. It's their religion. Do I think it's wrong? Yes. But I don't feel like I get to make that choice.
True, yeah. They do have the right at the end of the day to feel the way they feel.
They're dicks for doing so.
Oh, yes, 100%.
And
It's a shame, though, because it's like someone who's been a member of that community, like a Methodist, homosexual, whatever. It's like, I don't know, they probably don't feel welcome, especially with, something as sacred as marriage. Like, obviously the views may be in conflict if you're going to be strictly biblical about it, but nonetheless, they probably feel very close to that community. I'm sure, like, within a small town, their congregation, they probably were hoping that they could get married in their church. So it's just, I don't know.
yeah, it is a shame. And I know it's not an argument, and I'm not suggesting that it is, but I can't help but sometimes you just have to sit back and just look at it from at least they're not like throwing people off of buildings for being gay. Okay. Can we, they may be.
They're not. I suppose that's, the lowest bar for them too, but.
Yeah.
Or even Saudi Arabia, honestly.
Yeah. I mean,
they execute people in the public square, so I'd like to raise the bar a little bit for them, but I won't hold my breath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Especially when we play ball with them so much.
I hate how good of friends we are with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
It's like, it's disgusting.
Then like Trump with the whole reporter thing. It's just like, they definitely killed that guy. 2 minutes later, they definitely didn't kill that guy.
Yeah.
He got a phone call. He got a phone call from the Saudi prince, and he's like, bro, stop. We had a bro code. Stop talking about me killing people. And then he was like,
shit, you right, man.
What reporter? What?
Yeah. Let's not quibble over who killed who. Like,
MBS or Mohammed bin Salman, I think. MBS. They call him MBS, I think.
Yeah.
It's a crown prince. But
yeah, he was supposed to come in and kind of be more progressive than most other princes, and
women can drive now. I guess that's something.
I mean, hey, that's a massive step for them.
Like 60 years is too late, but
yeah,
I guess
better late than never, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, if they could just get rid of the revenge laws, that'd be great, or honor laws.
Oh yeah.
God. Well, they still kill people for blasphemy, and they're not gonna be an ally to the LGBT community anytime soon or whatever.
No.
So I don't know, but they're a conservative society, so that's just the way it is. I don't know. It's a shame that that people are acting like he's some sort of reforming prince when he's sort of just consolidating power and keeping the status quo, and then also just extrajudicial killings of people that are journalists in the U.S. too. It's like where is the line for the U.S.? Like, that's pretty awful to even to move on that kind of a thing. Like, I don't understand why Trump couldn't condemn that. That's pretty easy to condemn.
I think the line was drawn for the U.S. on September 11th, 2001. But,
yeah,
I think
it should. Yeah. But most of the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia.
And all of them.
Some were from Egypt, I think, and maybe.
But they were in a terrorist cell that was getting funding from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. And they export, weapons, I think, to terrorism cells across the Middle East, where, and they also export the ideology of Wahhabism, which urges more jihadi networks, and it's like when Bush said, you're either with us or against us, why are you cutting arms deals for a country that's complicit at best? I don't know. It's just sad to see the state of affairs. Kind of got sidetracked a little bit from gay marriage and.
Well, I mean, these are.
But yeah, we're just going down the route. Religious.
it's tangential. I mean, we got to it through a natural progression of topics, so it's yeah. To be honest, I don't know if there is much talk to have. I'm not a member of that community. I'm also not gay, so it doesn't really affect me. I mean, I have my opinions about it, obviously, which I've stated, but I don't think it's like some 4-dimensional issue that like is full of all these complexities that has to be hashed out. But I also can't, again, I can't help but lean on the side of as someone who grew up religious, I completely understand where the Methodist clergy are coming from. Like, if this is what you believe legitimately, and like this is you actually believe that there's like a God in a heaven, and you have these rules that you need to follow to get into this heaven, and we should be promoting that because hell's a fucking scary place and no one wants to go there, so we should do everything we can to make sure people live this way without forcing them to. Which, again, I guess that's what it comes down to. It's not like you're not being forced to be straight. You just aren't being offered services by the church if you aren't. Which
my only problem with that, though, like, I grew up religiously too. I was Christian and Roman Catholic. But, like, over time, like, I read more scripture and whatnot, and like, I can't help but look at the debate on gay marriage and think, like, why is that where you and on biblical interpretations? Like, are you okay with people working on the Sabbath? Oh, well, it says you're supposed to stone them to get to death if they do that. Like, you're not supposed to eat, like, shrimp or something like that. You're not supposed to...
Pretty much all of Leviticus.
Like, you could go on, but, like, all this stuff is in Leviticus and other parts of the Bible that prohibit things, and did the laws of Moses change, or are you just cherry picking, I guess, is where I kind of get frustrated with that whole argument.
So forgive me for not being up, and this is probably not the greatest group to ask this, but forgive me for not being, up to date on all my scripture. But is homosexuality even mentioned in the New Testament? I don't know if it is.
I think so. I don't think so.
So I always
only in the sense that I think Jesus affirmed the teachings of the Old Testament, but it wasn't like an explicit confirmation of homosexuality. No gay marriage. Like, it's not as clear cut as a lot of people try to paint it as.
I always come back to the criticism of Leviticus. Someone's like, in the Bible, this, that. And I'm like, oh, what is that? Is that a 50% cotton, 50% polyester shirt? I'm like, wow, God hates you now. It's like, you shaved your beard today? Bro, that's going to be like 10 years in purgatory.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is also, again, this is coming from someone who's a little bit critical. So I think that's probably a little mean-spirited of me to probably jab at people like that. But if you're going to be saying things like this, like, and you're going to be trying to tell people how to live their lives, I want to know where the line is, where the consistency is. And Steve just confirmed Steven, just confirmed. He said, my husband, the theologian, says, no, it isn't. I can't vouch. I never read it. So, or read it. I've read it. I had to I wrote a paper on it, and it was pretty interesting. And it's not a bad read. It's just, I couldn't help but at this point I was pretty much over religion, and so the more I read, the more it was just like reading a mythology book from like ancient Greece. Yeah, it's just the Middle East version.
There too, like, I've sort of drifted away from religion as time has gone on, and like, I'll just look at religiously charged debate, and I'm like, why can't you just take a step back and, like, consider that maybe your point of view is being influenced by, like, one strong subset within your own religion? Like, it doesn't have to be that way, like, on gay marriage, or, I don't know, like, something like stem cell research, or fucking contraceptives, or whatever it may be.
Fucking crab cakes, even. Like, come on.
Crab cake.
What's wrong with crab cake?
Right?
Come on.
You ever had a lobster roll? Come on.
You ever had seafood. Come on, it's great.
Yeah,
But yeah.
it's all.
I mean, obviously, I think pretty much everyone's in agreement now, besides like the hyper conservative religious right that is still a minority, Mike Pence. We're all pretty copacetic with gay marriage at this point, at least on, it was kind of crazy how fast the popular opinion changed, because right before it all went through the Supreme Court, it was still pretty 50-50, and now it's like 85%, or some 90%, something like that. So it was a good change. I think when people saw that God didn't smote us immediately for passing gay marriage, everyone was like,
Some people
okay.
tried to sell it like that. They're like, well, America's gonna collapse now. Just wait. Like,
Just the fucking space nuke.
like that was
Right.
that was the line of skin for God. Like not all the other fucked up shit we've done. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Oh,
sorry
man.
guys. Straw that broke the camel's back.
Sodom and
So, yeah.
Gomorrah, man. It's all over again. No, that's what Trump is. He's Trump's our punishment for the gay marriage.
Great way to go, I guess, huh?
I figured it out, man.
I think more people would be like, "No, he's the savior."
God. MAGA
I don't get that either, too, because he has really strong approval with the evangelical base. It's like, how is this guy in any way like a Christian person?
It's because he's white.
I mean,
Yeah.
I saw a really compelling post that I never thought about it this way, and it was like, it was this guy. It was on Twitter. He was like, if your religion was calling Obama the Antichrist and then Trump the savior anointed by God, it's like, I think we might be seeing a little bit of an issue here. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
fuck. I never even looked at it that way.
Yeah.
I don't get that too. They just miss the hypocrisy of a guy who like cheats on his wife and does it while his kid's on the way. Like, how is that someone God wanted to be president?
Well, God, you got to grab him by the pussy. That's in the Bible somewhere, I'm pretty sure. I think that was a quote.
Matthew 5:14, I think it was.
Yeah.
Just made that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just. I don't know. It's
I think Mike Pence is most of the reason why the
Oh,
evangelical base voted for him, because they're like, Mike Pence is like the greatest Christian ever, dude. He
yeah.
electrocuted gays or wanted to, it's whatever though.
Yeah.
He's doing it for them.
And even
Okay.
for a president who is more, I don't know, well remembered, or not well remembered, but I don't know, seen in a good light, JFK, who was banging different women left and right
Not exactly the
during his
highest
presidency.
moral
Yeah.
fiber there, but
Yeah.
Let's just, we just admit that the moral standards of our presidents aren't exactly the highest all the time. Instead of just there's some saint-like figures.
Yeah, and even like the founding fathers, like
Yeah,
like Thomas
Jefferson.
Jefferson. Yeah,
like you can't always just have some, I don't know, perfect human being leading your country, and you almost never will.
true.
So
I was gonna make a really bad joke.
What?
It's not gonna be funny now. It's lost the shock value, but I don't know why. I'm a sick, demented person, but I was sitting here and I was like, I was going through this like quick thing. I was like, imagine being that person who's like of this like horrible moral fiber, and then having your mind blown by some revelation. And I was like, well, someone beat him to it. So I was
Oh,
like,
damn. Yeah.
one day he just wakes up and he's like, you know what? Maybe I should improve my moral quality to be a better representation of America. But someone beat him to the punch. So
I mean, I think.
I was just gonna say this might be a good way to segue into the Cohen stuff.
okay.
He's talking about the possibility of like impeachment and whatnot. I'm not so sure I'd be more comfortable with Mike Pence running our country. Like
Yeah.
a dude who said evolution shouldn't or needs to be taught aside creationism in schools and shit, like among other things that he's done, like why, I don't know, why they think that's the lesser of two evils in this administration or whatever.
This is a minor thing. So occasionally, and I've brought this guy up way too many times on this show, I enjoy Ben Shapiro's humor, and I like to listen just for the news. I'm not a big fan of him or his political positions. I think he as an individual is entertaining. I'll say that. A lot of his politics, like Israel, I can't stand him. Cops can't stand him. You know, drugs can't. I mean, he's pretty libertarian on that, but just his opinion, I don't agree with and stuff like that. But he was talking about he just randomly had this advertisement for this creationism thing, and he was like, "Oh, we got to talk about this book." And he's like, "It's 99% approval that aspeciation does not occur." And I was like, "Excuse me?" I was like, what? He's like, you know, there's evolution inside of a species, and you know, things change based on their environment, but we don't have any evidence to show that there's aspeciation. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? There's like 70 years of it, bro. Hundreds actually, but like of hard science, you know?
Yeah. Says the guy who's not a biologist, but you know. It's like, I'll take the guys who actually have studied it for their entire professional careers instead of from a guy who's got a religious agenda from a book wrote 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, and the person who wrote the book probably paid him to say whatever he said.
Oh, it wasn't. So. It was an advertisement.
Yeah, so he definitely got paid.
I'm just like, what happened to the facts and logic, dude? Like, that's your sales pitch, you know?
Everybody's got their price.
Don't care about your feelings, right?
Yeah, Jesus.
Except when they interfere with my point of view.
Oh, man.
As long as you're not a Libby cuck. That's all.
That one.
Oh man, the only time I use the word cuck ever is when someone calls me a magatard. I'm like, okay, you want to go this route, huh? I'm like, I'll show you magatard. Like, I don't even like the guy. You cuck.
You know what? I haven't even heard that one before. I feel like I've seen the extent of the vitriol on Twitter and Reddit and elsewhere. But yeah, that's a new one.
I'm no one's ally. I swear to God. Republicans hate me because I'm not for their state. They're like, we like small government, except for fucking not. And I'm like, stop being a hypocritical son of a bitch. One of my favorite memes this year was from The Last Jedi, and it was when she hands him the lightsaber, and it was like Republican voting base, and it was like balancing the budget and dealing with the deficit, and it was like Trump, and then he like throws the lightsaber over his shoulder, and I was like, yes, hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Bush did that too.
Yeah,
they blow up the. I mean, Rand Paul at least called him out on that. I did hear that, but
oh yeah, he calls it. That's like his big thing is the Fed, and obviously, so he hits the big three like things that all Republicans agree with, or all libertarians agree with. So he's always about the deficit, always about the Fed, always about taxes. So,
did you vote for Gary Johnson 2016?
I did. I felt like he was most aligned with me. I knew he wasn't going to win. After he didn't make it to the debates, I knew he wasn't going to pull higher than 10%. But he was most successful libertarian.
Man, you know, like they might as well add like a diversity of voices. I mean, granted, the Republican field in that primary was fucking huge, but nonetheless, like it'd still be good to have some diversity of voice because I don't know, there was at least like 5 or 6 people on the Republican side that like didn't have any difference in views and didn't need to be up there together, but
they were just like Republican.
More
NPCs.
Than half of them were fucking garbage too.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that video of Ben Carson where he just like won't walk out on stage. Like, bro, just stick to brain surgery, man. Come on.
Dr. Carson was a character.
Yeah.
He was, man.
I just feel like he would have been a garbage president.
Policy on like some teeths in the Bible or some crap like that. I don't know.
What was it?
It just sounded like he wanted. I think it was like he wanted to base his tax system on like teeths in the Bible, like tributes that they had back in biblical times.
What the fuck?
Don't think that's gonna translate into a modern economy too well, dude. But just
bring back Hammurabi's law while you're at it.
Yeah.
Let's just go all the way back.
Pull that apple. That's my hand now, boy.
Then you put the hand down next to the apple, and you put like $20 next. You know, the little $20 sign. One hand.
Who was it? I think it was Chris Christie who destroyed Marco Rubio. That was pretty amazing. Just calling him out for like the same like milquetoast talking points about Obama over and over. There it is again.
Yeah.
Marco bot.
He was very NPC. Rubio. I think actually Jeb was the most NPC out of all of them.
Yeah.
He was the most beep boop Republican out there.
Please
pretty
clap.
much, but cringiest moment of
Oh,
the
yeah.
entire 2016 election cycle.
Yeah, and there was a lot of them too.
Yeah.
Please clap.
Jeb is weak. Oh my god.
I don't.
Yeah, that was kind of righteous, like seeing the Bush dynasty like go up in flames, like in real time.
Yeah.
What's up with
So
all this
true.
like post love for George
I
W.
hate-
Bush?
I hate that.
Yeah.
Have you seen I don't know if it was SNL or something. I think it was like Will Ferrell coming back to do his George Bush impression. It's like this Trump fella, he's really bringing a lot of attention away from me, and that's great. I just want to. I was a terrible president.
I know, like everybody's like,
He was bad.
he's a cute old man now. You know, he's like flipping up his poncho during like the inauguration and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, look at
He gave
Bush.
Obama a piece of candy.
Yeah.
I guess we can forgive him for the wars he started and the botching of humanitarian crises. Yeah.
Patriot
Well, even
Act
before
wasn't so
that-
bad.
Even before that, he was just like a good old boy that like you'd crack a beer with. Like
Yeah. Have
terrible
a big-
fucking president, but
Fool me
beer with-
once.
Tell him how shitty a job he did, and, like
Yeah.
why it was bad, but
oh yeah, have you seen Vice more? The movie?
Oh no, I haven't seen the movie. I thought you were like it was like the news.
Vice-
No,
Oh,
yeah. The one
Yeah,
with
we-
Dick Cheney. Yeah, we went and saw that when I was on leave. It
it's a must
was really good. Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
corruption in real time for sure. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Dick Cheney was like a walking corruption nightmare. If that's what it was about.
Yeah, it was.
God, that guy had so many fucking back pockets with the military-industrial complex. Like Jesus.
Steve Carell was great as Donald Rumsfeld too.
Yeah. Very true.
So was it like a comedy or was it a more like serious?
It was both a comedy and a drama.
Okay.
Like, 'cause you see, like, there were moments that would make you laugh, but then others where you were just, like, left with chills thinking, like, I can't believe this shit really happened. We're
Yeah.
still living the consequences of it, but
And it was the same director as The Big Short. So
Oh,
like
yeah.
it was similar
It was great.
style.
explaining, like, massive events unfolding like that. Like, the financial crash is really hard to understand, but he makes it fairly understandable for the average person, I think.
Yeah.
The what's a good way of putting this? It's always funny how much like I'm sure in 10 years people are gonna look back at Obama and be like, oh look, it's cute old Obama walking around, and then like all the people, maybe not, I don't know, but there's just something weird that even like the people who were screaming that like the same stuff they say about Trump, they're like George Bush is a Nazi. George Bush is like, Satan, and he's going to like kill all the gay people and eat their babies, and all this crap. I mean, I've always thought he was a joke. Even when I was a kid, man, listen to him get up there, talk about, man, I love me some Tarkos. I'm like, did he just say, was that an R?
I'm gonna get the terrorists.
Nuclear?
watch what you do.
Yeah.
He's a nuclear power.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I believe it's in Texas too. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me once, you can't get fooled again.
God, I was just about to use that one. Fool me once.
And then,
Made
J-
for a great song.
yeah, right. Yeah, J. Cole's song.
Boom, too crazy, man.
Yeah.
All the gaffes that we went through. So I'm like, but I don't know. Trump like gives him a run for his money with all the stupid shit he says. Like, he'll just like saying that Frederick Douglass is still kicking it with us. Like, what are you talking about? Dude, he literally said something like that, like talking about the painting in the White House, and he was like, "Yeah, I hear Frederick Douglass is doing well," or some shit like that. Oh God. And like said something about Andrew Jackson, or when he was dead, like 40 years before the Civil War started, or something like that.
Yeah, Stonewall
Dude, what-
Jackson.
Like, I know you love to talk, but like, please try to do it when you've been informed about what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it just comes from years of being a bullshitter, man. Like,
Being the
Yeah.
top dog, no one
You
challenges
heard of the
you.
deal.
yeah,
Heard of the bullshit deal.
When you're Donald
I mean,
Trump, I don't think a lot of people come up to you and correct you.
yeah, no.
No.
And if they do,
get a
you
lot-
don't fucking listen.
Well, that's what I worry about with like his administration. Like, is he only getting sycophants who will just tell him exactly what he wants to hear and won't offer any like justified criticism of stuff he wants to do? Like, I don't know. It just seems like all the people that he puts into power either resign in disgrace over some scandal or get replaced by someone who will just tell him what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Obama got a lot of criticisms about that, about how he basically was surrounded himself with a bunch of yes men. Like, hey, let's like do universal health care tomorrow. And they were like, cool. Can we keep the doctors? And they were like, yeah, you can keep the doctors. You know?
Yeah.
he almost listened to people talking like Obamacare too. Like he listened to people in the healthcare industry, like from the insurance companies too. Which like that's gonna distort your view of like actually how to reform healthcare just like by default doing it that way. But
I just can't, if we're going to talk about healthcare, I got to bring this up. I
Bernie?
can't stress.
that as well.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how. And if you want to keep going, we can. But we could take a break after this topic, unless
Sure.
or whatever you want to do, man. We're here for you. But
You want to do healthcare? Take a quick break and get back into it, or
the biggest thing for me with healthcare is we have the modern perspective and we have the modern solutions to the problems that exist that we've seen in places like Europe and Canada and Great Britain. And I posted something in this group the other day just to give a little bit of a preface to my opinion, and it was a PewDiePie video because I watch some of his stuff.
interview.
Yeah, and he posted things. It was like a things that are mildly irritating video, and it was this guy in Great Britain who was sitting in the doctor's office, and he had his phone out and he took a picture, and he's like, it's been 4 hours since my appointment, and then he sat there and he was like, oh my god, I hate using the British healthcare system. He's like, I just need to start showing up 3 hours late because everything's always like 3 to 4 hours behind. And I was like, fuck, man. I can't, if I'm in a doctor's office more than 15 minutes without a doctor, I'm going up to the front desk asking where the fuck my doctor is.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if that's just, I'm sure that's mostly anecdotal. I'm sure the whole system isn't like that, but there are issues with it. But what I was going to say before I went off on that tangent is that we have to look at the history of healthcare, especially in the United States of America, and the transition from us being able to have a society where almost nobody except for the super rich had health insurance. And if they did, it was super minimal, like crisis health insurance. And medical checkups were affordable. You could go into the doctor's office, you pay for it with the cash in your pocket. You wanted some cold medicine, they could whip you up, or get you a prescription or something, and you could pay for it out of pocket. And how there's a direct correlation between the increasing in lobbying and regulation in the government and prices on pharmaceuticals. There's an increase in the cost of payments for medical treatments. This is not something that's just made up. This is corroborated that there is a direct link in history between government intervention into the medical system, which some of it I can understand, and the increase in healthcare prices, to the point to where now, if you don't have health insurance and something bad happens to you, you're screwed. You are screwed, and that's a problem.
No, I agree with you on a lot of the early parts about healthcare and the problems that we've been facing, and certainly I think the lobbying that goes on is akin to just legalized bribery.
Pharmaceutical lobbying is just, that's a fucking nightmare.
But I think from a progressive perspective, you would look at that and say the problem is that the healthcare companies are lobbying government to get outcomes that are favorable to them, rather than the government protecting the interests of the public, which you might get in something like a Medicare for All system, for example.
Yeah,
being denied for pre-existing conditions, getting charges for life-saving medication racked up hundreds of dollars unnecessarily when Canadians don't have that problem, Europeans in general don't have that problem. Like, those are things that result from private industry in healthcare, not from the government trying to manage it. Not to say that there wouldn't be potentially some issues like you raised with the anecdotal example of like wait times and whatnot. That could be an issue, but I think like the larger problems that the average American deals with healthcare are because of insurance companies, not the government.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead and make your point. I know I've been dominating our side of the conversation. So
no, it's all good. Yeah, I would say that, like, I don't know, as far as obviously you were saying that the politicians, their motives and their goals are not where they should be in protecting the people. But I feel like as long as those pharmaceutical CEOs are lining their pockets, I don't think that'll ever change.
Well, yeah.
it can
I think
change.
Oh, it can,
that's
but
meant for getting rid of Citizens United and things like that. Like, super PACs should not exist.
very true.
PACs shouldn't even exist, but like you should just be able to donate to a campaign, not have a group exert like undue influence just by virtue of how much money they have on their.
True.
Yeah,
Very
exactly. I think that's a pretty universal, if we're going to have government around, we need to make sure we minimize the amount of corruption, and it doesn't have to be an internal force for it to be corruption. I think a lot of people forget about that. Their external forces are a lot of times massive motivators for corruption. So,
as far as companies in the private sector.
yeah, that's what like PACs, these are all private entities, they're
Yeah.
not government affiliated. So,
I think that's part of the reason I really support Bernie still is like I haven't heard before him in 2016 virtually anyone, maybe Obama a little bit, talk about like the amount of money in politics, especially after Citizens United got passed and you had super PACs. Like, it is obscene that like massive corporations can just essentially buy advertising time for a congressional campaign and just it's buying influence. If you can just win over the public's entire perception of a candidate, what they see on television, radio, online, elsewhere, like I don't know. That seems like a starting point where you'd fix a lot of, or not fix, but get on the track towards fixing a lot of issues in this country if you just didn't have like essentially legalized bribery with corporate PAC money.
I think it's no surprise that I'm not a huge fan of Bernie Sanders, but he's not my least favorite. That's Kamala Harris. She's my least favorite. So
I might be with you on that, actually.
Elizabeth Warren's
Yeah.
probably right behind her, and then I'd probably put Bernie after them. But
Do you like anyone on the Democratic side, or
do I
just
like
kind of-
anyone?
or like on principle, you're just kind of opposed to that field?
It's not a principle thing. Like if they all got rid of and granted, a lot of them have rolled this back, but there's still support for stuff like a Green New Deal, and we were kind of talking about like one bullet point of the Green New Deal, like implementing a complete single payer healthcare system. We have a $2 trillion medical industry that would just disappear. Pretty much. Wouldn't completely disappear, obviously, but we have a $2 trillion medical sector.
Private healthcare to some extent.
Yeah, there will be supplemental insurances.
Other countries with socialized medicine, but
when they
you
sorry,
don't have as much.
yes.
Obviously, yeah, it's going to take away a lot of private healthcare, but at the same time, like from my perspective as a progressive, if you add the profit motive as being the driving force behind the market in healthcare, like, you're gonna get bad outcomes. Like, that's why people have to choose between selling their house and getting cancer treatment. Like, what kind of a system is that?
Yeah, it's a
If
broken
that's-
system that we have now. I would
How are you going to
argue.
get rid of that? I think by just allowing privatization to be the answer. I don't think it's an answer at all.
It couldn't be. You can't just like rip out all the regulations and then just leave what we have right now. No, there has to be reform. I just legitimately don't believe that single payer healthcare is the answer. First off, also is that it really drives me up a wall. I know that taxes are not a big thing for I mean, they are a big thing. I'm not going to pretend like no one cares at all about taxes being exuberant, but you're not going to pay for something like a single payer healthcare system with our current income structure, unless you just want to continue to perpetuate the national debt, which is just a looming inflation crisis. So
That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah. So
Can I respond to that real quick, or
no, yeah, go for it, man.
yeah. So I agree that you're going to probably have to raise taxes, and it's expensive to do single payer healthcare, but at the same time, like, we're already paying more on the healthcare that we do with government expenditures right now. I think twice as much as Canada is paying for per capita. So they have a single payer system, and they are saving money in the long term, and that's what different groups, like I think it was the Heritage Foundation and other organizations that were co-brother funded, by the way, found that we would save a lot of money over time with a single payer system because it's just more cost efficient. I'm not saying it wouldn't probably cost money in the short term. It would probably bloat the federal budget inevitably, but I think it's still a better, more stable long-term solution, especially when the Democrats' answer in the last decade has been, we'll do a half measure with Obamacare. The Republicans' measure has been,
Garbage.
We're just going to give Obamacare, and that's it. So, I don't know. I think it's a bold plan, and it might not work out perfectly, but I think it's way better than the status quo. So, that's fine.
I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but this is when we really start getting into some of so one of my biggest issue with the think tanks, for lack of a better word, on both sides, because that's pretty much what the Heritage Fund is a think tank. Sure. Is that you get great example, Green New Deal. Okay, you have Green New Deal comes out. You have all of these think tanks that get their hands on it, and they start crunching numbers, and they start running through all these models and everything. And then you get half of them that says it'll work and it'll save this much money, and you get the other half that use the exact same set of numbers and come out with a completely different outcome because of the way that they use their models and projections. So we can't, that is one potential outcome. If everything goes well and we manage to implement the system exactly as it's described, and I'm sure in their cost saving measures, it's, there's a certain time frame included in a transitory period and things. I haven't read the report from them, so I wouldn't know what the stipulations are to meet those requirements. But I'm not seeing plans like that in modern propositions. And hopefully, at some point they're still trying to sell the deal to people. Single payer healthcare is still super radical. It's a very far left proposition still.
It's pretty much mainstream politics in every other industrialized country on earth, but
for the United States,
United States, it would be a push to the left. Yeah,
it is.
Even like the centrist party in Canada wouldn't dare touch the single payer healthcare system because they know it's just it's not like flawless by any stretch of the imagination. I don't imagine there's any healthcare system that ever will be, but like the net effect seems to be more approved by members of their society.
So let me ask you this, okay? Let's flip the coin. Let's say we can go back. Let's say we can implement a system which would involve things like breaking up monopolies and stuff like that in the current pharmaceutical industries, rolling back some regulations and increasing transparency in these organizations, which I think is something that we could do right now that needs to happen.
Sure.
But so we start on this path towards, instead of taking the single payer route, there's like this branch, okay? And we try to roll back to the system that we had in the 1960s, even into the mid 70s was really when healthcare costs started getting to the point where everybody needed healthcare insurance. And we rolled it back. Yeah. We rolled it back to the time frame in like the 50s and 60s, 40s, where you could go to the doctor's office, you could pay for your checkup, you could get your x-rays done, you could get your surgery done and pay for that, and you wouldn't necessarily have to have these. Do you have an issue with that if that was a potential outcome?
To go back to the healthcare status quo, like, of that era?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because I think there were still a lot of people that weren't getting good coverage, and you still weren't stopping them from discriminating against pre-existing conditions. And you raised the point of healthcare costs going up, and some of that does have to do with treatments becoming more sophisticated and almost inevitably more expensive. But I don't know. I don't think that if you go back to a time when the working poor couldn't get any kind of health care, the disabled couldn't get any kind of health care, that we'd be
Well,
better at.
I mean,
So,
so I was kind of hoping that, you maybe I should have been more explicit of the fact that obviously, we're in a modern context now. We're not going to like have differential race because you're black or something like that, or not offer you healthcare services. I kind of feel like that was kind of, insinuated, but at the same time, so I like to come back to, we can go way back with healthcare talking about it. I can't necessarily say that there would be any kind of like regulation to do this, but there was first, God, what's the name of the hospital? There was a hospital in Chicago. It's still there now, one of the big ones there, First Methodist or something like that. And what they would do is they would charge people differently based off of how much income they had. And you're like, well, that kind of sounds like a tax. Well, you could go somewhere else, right? But what you would do is you would go there and you would like, oh, like you're Richie McGee and we fix your arm. That'll be $200. It's like, you're, Jim Bob, make a little bit of money. That'll be like $120, or whatever, $150. And then you got Larry and Sue that just barely get by, $100. And then you got the guy who can't, just got hit by a car, has no insurance, broke out of his mind. You get this for free, or like $20 or whatever, as cheap as they could make it. And they would subsidize the cost of people who couldn't afford healthcare, or at least the prices that were available, by marginally increasing the rates. And some other, I think Mary Seacole was the one who charged, everything was at like 180% or 200%. She wrote about it in one of her papers. And, this was a long time ago though, and what she would do is that she would overcharge on all of these things, and people would complain that their healthcare costs so much. And then she would help the poor people, and then she would be able to give them medical services. And back then that was really huge for smaller communities, because if you kept your poor people from, getting everybody sick with the measles didn't spread to all the rich people. So there was like, this community effort behind it to keep everyone healthy and everyone productive, and not basically, because sick people who can't work are essentially, if you look at it from a societal level, just kind of like baggage. Unless you
on the GDP and on social services and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there too. So.
Sure. So do you think like there should be a system like that, or do you think that?
Oh, I would love that. I personally would love that. And
it seems like, I don't know. I kind of think that's what Medicare for All like would sort of try to do, is like people who couldn't afford like life-saving surgery or whatever, what have you, because they're making under $60K a year or something like that. Like that burden is going to go on the taxpayer eventually anyway. If the hospital has to pay for it and it's unaccounted for, I think it would kind of trickle down, for lack of a better term. And whereas if you have a system of healthcare where everyone is accounted for, you're not going to have the issues of people going into bankruptcy and having to choosing between to do that. And you're going to, I think ultimately it just produce better outcomes. But I don't know. We probably disagree on that, but.
Got anything?
No, I'm not that well versed in healthcare, so I kind of just let you guys.
Oh, you're good.
Do your thing.
So I think the real root of this problem, and I didn't want to get into it right now because this could be a big topic, and I know we were going to do a break for a second, but
let's not try to like solve it tonight. But
yeah, really for me, and I'm sure you knew this was coming, is that taxes is a huge part of it.
Oh yeah,
me. I'm a big believer that taxation is theft. It is an extortion of funds if you don't consent to it, and that's a fundamental piece of my ideology. So whenever people, I will play the thought experiment as much as we can. But if someone comes up to me and says like, "Okay, we want this new thing. This will help everybody," and I don't have a problem with a new program coming into existence. Is if let's say we could cut costs in other places, like we didn't need to spend, and we could pay for single payer healthcare and like reduce military spending and
That's probably what would happen, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't foot the whole bill. Even if we cut $300 billion off the budget of, cut it damn near in half, it wouldn't even come close to paying for the whole bill.
You'd also have less out of pocket expenses for healthcare and copays and whatnot. Your copay would be zero, so it's like it's a trade off.
Yeah,
when people on the left say like, "Oh, free healthcare," I kind of get annoyed with that because obviously it's not free.
Yeah.
So it's getting paid for somehow, but
you're paying for it up front.
The cost will be shifted via taxes. So you're right about that. So you think that's a bad way to do it through taxes, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it was a voluntary fund and we could somehow get, I wouldn't have it. I mean, if my healthcare costs were if I knew that my money was going to a program to where I could get a zero copay, everything would be taken care of for me, and I would save money off of normal insurance, I would voluntarily subject myself to that. I have no issue with that. However, because of the way that a single payer healthcare system works and how you kind of have to capture the industry in order to make it work. You can't just like pop up a single payer healthcare system. You have to rework how healthcare works inside of a nation. So, and then you come back to the taxes problem with me, which is the most direct way to fund a restructuring like this. And I can't I don't consent to taxes for a numerous number of reasons. One of them being my own fucking paycheck. So, and I can't separate these are for my medical taxes. These are for my going to bomb brown people taxes. I can't, if I could separate that out, I would consider doing that. I wouldn't have any issue with that. But the fact that I can't consent to where my money's going to, and it is going to things that are unethical and I cannot support, I can't. I can't.
I mean, it's a difficult thing because, you're right. If we have a democratic system, but if I vote for someone who doesn't want to go to war and the guy who wants to go to war wins and we go to war, my taxes are unwillingly being spent on bombing other people or occupying another country or whatever. But I think if you go to its logical conclusion, you're going to have to admit that taxes are a necessary part of society.
For a civilized society. Yeah. Tax.
Yeah. You get that.
I've heard that one a couple times.
but what is the alternative to, what if everyone stopped paying their taxes? Would we have a national defense? Would we have an infrastructure? Would we have security? Would we have, I don't know, all sorts of services that government provides, emergency services?
Well, so if we're talking about the total elimination of taxes, which I don't even think is necessary, I think, I could get really deep into this, but we'll just go through the bullet points. We call it ANCAPistan, just to give the name for it. This is the no centralized government, no taxes, all that stuff. You have, typically it's a city-state model is what most people accept would be the norm, but there's nothing stopping a larger conglomeration of people from getting together as long as it's all voluntary. And, the state of California could stay the state of California and they could run their operation the exact fucking same as long as they all consented to it. That's the only requirement. Nothing is stopping them from being exactly the way they are. So
aren't they also bound by the national laws of the land and treaties internationally and different labor laws and things like that they can't just, pull themselves away from voluntarily?
So you're talking internationally speaking?
That too, but also just the fact that they're one state among 50 others, or among 49 others, one state of 50 total. So it's there's, I don't know, I think in that particular example, there'd be a lot of conflict that would be not easily resolved.
Well, there could be. So if we look at it from an international perspective, there isn't a single piece of international law or human rights code or anything that we've already agreed to that wouldn't be intrinsically included inside of the non-aggression principle. So that's one important thing to realize is slave labor would not be acceptable just because the federal government goes away tomorrow, because the non-aggression principle, being the guiding principle of ANCAPistan, protects people from things like that. Anything that's going to...
What's to stop a massive corporation from, just exploiting child labor or a lack of minimum wage laws or a 40-hour work week or whatnot? Because you needed a progressive movement in the United States in the early 20th century to even get that on the books legally.
So
that was the reason we had progressive laws in the first place, was because unfettered free market capitalism allowed the producers of capital to just exploit people at their will.
Well, we could go into the misnomer of the 1920s and 30s, but there
It was before that even, like
yes,
Gilded Age. You know,
the Gilded Age. You're right.
Yeah.
There. Oh, okay. So let's just continue on. I won't get too far off onto that. But what I was going to say is that what I like to say all the time is that I appreciate the state for building the roads, and this is lowercase s state. You know, the highway system. I could not even begin to imagine how difficult it would have been to build a networked highway system that all connects to each other and meets reasonable efficiency requirements, and has built this network through what would end up being a bunch of different regions and townships. That coordination is just as difficult to do even in a modern time between states. Like, forget when you don't have a centralized authority to coordinate these things. So, and you're right. We have created a society to where there's a certain minimum expectation expected of employers, right? And if we never had the liberalization of the workforce in these waning years of the American industrial sector, we might, never have reached that point. We might still be living in the corporatist dystopia that we have today. But I think a lot of people get the misconception that Ancapistan, as we'll call it here, is this embracing of corporatism, and that's not the case at all.
Sure. And I know that's not what you want the outcome to be, but I think from a progressive standpoint, I'd wonder what recourse the average citizen has to, if it's not legally prohibited to, give people $1 an hour and it's profitable for a corporation to do so, or make them work ungodly hours, what is to stop them from doing that? And does that violate NAP in that case? Is it just okay for them to be able to do that?
Would you work for $1 an hour, just out of curiosity?
I probably wouldn't, but if the model across the entire industry was that no one's going to bother paying more than $1 an hour because they don't need to, well, then that's going to be a problem. Not every industry would have that problem, but I could see scenarios where, cheap labor is just exploited. All that labor is producing tons of wealth for people, but they're going to choose to pay them little because somebody else will come in and do it, which we have that problem with immigration too right now. People will come in and do jobs for cheap because they'll just take what they can get. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's kind of got to be a balancing act in my view.
So unionization is still an option. People and groups have power, especially in communities.
So you're pro-union then? You think that's good?
Voluntary membership in a union, yeah. Okay, I don't think this is a big thing for me. I don't think anything needs to be forced onto anybody. I think so. If you are a non-union member who's having union dues extracted from your pay, you don't get union rights, you still get union rights. And I think that's the issue, is that if you don't pay union dues, you shouldn't get union rights. I think that
was a recent Supreme Court decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was. And
what was the decision that came out of that?
It was that if you aren't if you are willingly not a union member, you don't have to pay union dues. And that just makes sense. And so trust me, if I was if I ran a union, I would want everybody to pay into my fucking union. Don't get me wrong. They're milking it. But what the next step needs to be is for the unions to say, okay, well, if you're not a union member, you don't get the benefits of the union. And if you don't want to pay union dues, you get to accept those consequences. And as an adult who has a job that has a union, you should, if you're mature enough to retract your union dues and make that decision for yourself to get that extra $50 a month or whatever it is, you're mature enough to accept the consequences of you not doing that. But unionizing is a great way to protect workers' rights. I'm 100% okay with people unionizing.
Do you think they've had the ability to impact these corporations anymore, though, in recent years?
Well, a lot of times it's because of the 1960s and 70s and 80s and shit, since the beginning of time. Basically every time we get some kind of conservative in office, they hamstring a union, and they make it difficult for a union to do what in the free market they would just be able to unionizing was, what was it, the 30s, whenever unionizing was really embraced. Then we got through World War II, and then we had the 50s whenever unionizing was pretty much damn near made illegal. And
The Red Scare kind of made people go overboard.
yeah,
But you look what happened, like, I think kind of the legacy of that, though, you get what happened from the 1970s through to NAFTA and whatnot, where huge multinational corporations will just ship jobs overseas. We can find a pool of labor over here in, ironically, communist countries at the time that will just work for cheap labor, and, they'll take a couple pennies a day because it's the best that they can get.
well,
How does a union compete with that? There's
never,
no, like, if you don't put a trade framework in to prevent that, then the unions are powerless to stop that. There's no point in collective bargaining if they can just ship jobs overseas.
it's important to
So,
realize that
it might be a different issue altogether, but I just wanted to throw that in there because I feel like, I don't know, it's got to be talked about.
yeah, well, it's important to realize that there's not a single thing we can do besides AI automation of entire factory forces to where no human supervision is needed that industry will ever come back to the United States. It's a fallacy.
Yeah.
I hate when every Republican says that we're going to bring manufacturing back, they're full of shit. Nothing they can do can fix that now. There's way too much competition, and we have a globalized economy now. We will forever be a service-based economy because of that. And there will be countries that will always be industrial sectors to serve that because they are able to profit off of us being service-based economies, where we need these imports of raw materials and processed goods and stuff like that. So I think that's a really important distinction to make, is that manufacturing is leaving. It's been leaving. It continues to leave. Made in America is like, it's a big deal for a reason now.
You're right, though. Automation and AI is only going to make it worse. So I think that's where, like, the topic of, like, progressive politics, or even something like Andrew Yang, if you heard of him, the presidential candidate.
Universal basic income.
Yeah, UBI, he's advocated that, which it's interesting. I don't know. It could work. It sounds like potentially it'll, I don't know, it won't be the panacea probably for all the problems plaguing the poor, but there does need to be some bold solution, I think, to deal with the urban decay and automation and all this stuff that's just transforming society rapidly. Neither party seems to have a robust enough answer.
And I know this is not going to be an acceptable answer, but I've always said for UBI, I tried really hard to make UBI work. I was like, there's potential in this idea. At least it's like, even if it's just like a transitory program that we put ourselves into. Sure. But the only conclusion that I can come up with is that if we wanted to do a UBI, if we replace the welfare state with the UBI and it is a better return on investment, I don't have any problem with that. If we replace the welfare state with the UBI and it is a worse return on investment, we might as well not do it. And from the numbers that I've seen, you can't really have a UBI that is both a better return on investment and an acceptable replacement for the welfare state that can fill in for the gaps without implementing things like if you have multiple people in a household, you have to cut one of their UBI payments because it gets kind of, it becomes a bureaucratic nightmare, honestly. But we could automate the entire process, though. I'd like to say that we could save a lot of money right there, because most of the projections have this like multi-billion-dollar management sector put in for the UBI. It really doesn't have to be that complicated. It's 2019, guys. So you need a couple people in an office to make sure everything's running right and a support network, and then you're good. Like,
yeah.
In fact,
I mean, that does seem to be like the political issue of our time. Like, you think about why Trump won in 2016, like, people on the left will probably, not all of them for sure, but a lot of them will say, oh, it's because Trump's a bigot and he catered to their, like, worst impulses and whatnot. But most people who voted for Trump aren't racist. Most people voted because they wanted to shake up the political system, and because he was promised. He did. Yeah, that's the least you can say. But he promised people in states like, out in the Midwest and in like West Virginia with coal, for example, or any of the Rust Belt states, that he's going to keep these jobs or bring them back. And seems like that's just becoming increasingly impossible over time, just by like I don't know, just forces that are at play internationally, like I alluded to earlier. So I'm not convinced the Republican Party has a strong enough answer for that, which is why I side with someone like Bernie. His proposals may not work, but I think they're ambitious and could do a lot of good if they're done right. So
Progressives have better answers than Republicans. I'm not going to say that. Like if we're looking at just like what's a better solution, doing nothing is not a good solution. We have problems that need to be addressed, and we need to. Holy shit! I wrote a big piece on this back when I was big into my blog that I never touch anymore. It was like this big dossier about AI, and I'm a firm believer that AI is going to fucking ruin the transportation industry, and that's 6 million jobs right there. That just like poof.
The biggest industry in a lot of red states, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and like
a lot of people with jobs.
I know like 3 people who are truck drivers. Their job's not going to exist in maybe it's 50 years, maybe 100. It's going. So, it's going. It's going to go away. Yeah, and I think it's irresponsible now of people. As much as I hate the way that the college system is right now, and I think it's grossly inflated in price, and it's pretty much not worth any of it. But you're gonna need to be in some service-based sector. You cannot. If you're growing up right now in our generation and you're gearing yourself to be in some sort of like labor sector, like working in a factory, or like even on any place that can be replaced by AI or machinery, even a lot of like insurance jobs, stuff like that, are already being phased out by like IBM's Watson project. I don't know if you heard about that. Insurance assessors. Why do you need a human to do that? It's just crunching numbers. A computer is way better at assessing risks on loans. You don't need a banker to do that.
Just put in an algorithm.
Yeah.
There you go.
And a damn near perfect algorithm. And it's, I think you're irresponsible if you're not trying to. You either need to be geared towards some kind of craft that won't go away anytime soon because it requires that human touch, or you need to put yourself in a service that's going to facilitate the coming times. And you know what? It may be a bad bet. You may not get to work the job of your dreams. An AI revolution may never come during our lifetime, but you got to hedge against those kind of things because
I think it's coming. I think AI is coming sooner than we think, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Maybe
I've watched too many Elon Musk videos, but I don't know. I think it's I don't know. Something like the internet seemed to completely blindside people, and look how that proliferated, and just smartphone technology, all that jazz.
And I feel like once the AI, takeover eventually does come, I feel like it's going to be a weird surge of jobs of creating the AI, and then it's just going to instantly take that away within a decade.
So like
stable jobs, I imagine though.
True.
So there's a lot of different what's the word I'm looking for here? Breakdowns, I guess, of how AI could go. None of us really know. This is like a brand new emerging sector that we have no idea. The most rudimentary artificial intelligence, like the step above machine learning, like we're doing now, is going to be so dramatically impactful and that'll be like Gen 1 shit. Like that'll just be the beginning. That'll be like your self-driving cars and your automated production facilities and stuff like that. That'll be when that kicks in, and we will be the big facilitators of that globally. Which, if you think we're going to have a tough time with AI, just wait till AI hits China. Oof. Oof.
That's a good point.
But they're going to have their own problems to deal with in the next 50 years.
It's going to be rough. But there's the general. And again, none of us know. This could be completely off base. We could have some Nikola Tesla of AI come up through here that just completely crushes all expectations and releases a super AI that can do it all. But we're pretty sure that we're not going to be able to create AI that are intuitive enough to be able to be major innovators. They'll be hyper efficient. They'll be able to make efficiencies, and they will be able, but like, they won't be able to create newer, better AI. And the human touch is what everybody calls it.
Singularity or whatever, then we're probably going to live in the Terminator or some shit like that.
Or Utopia. That's also a possibility of a singularity too.
Flip the coin, find out, I guess.
Exactly.
we'll want our ARs then.
Yeah.
It's yeah. If we were ever to reach a singularity and it wanted to kill us, it would probably just weaponize all the diseases that we have. That'd be the most efficient way.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Go CDC files. Let me just look at these real quick.
Right.
That'd be the easiest way for it to do so. Like,
Weaponized anthrax. All right.
yeah. Then again, it doesn't need. If it's a robot, it doesn't care about. Well, the destruction would probably of the infrastructure would probably be not so great for an AI. So I think that'd be the least. They'd probably see that as most calculated and efficient way to do it, like poisoning or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's gonna be. I don't know. It could be awful because, like, we get one chance, and if we fuck it up, we're pretty much toast.
Could be
So,
amazing though. Could be the best thing
Could
that's
be.
ever happened to humanity.
Usher in a utopian era, and everyone will get along, sing kumbaya, or we'll all die.
Could man. Yeah. Hey, flip the
We'll
coin.
see.
It's an
Right.
inevitability. I don't care what happens. Someone's going to make it in their backyard in 1,000 years, or some big funded think tank is going to make it in 50.
Yeah,
You know?
there are a lot of interesting questions about that too, because it's like, if an authoritarian state like China does that first, like, what is that going to mean?
I really hope we do it first. I know we're
Yeah.
not perfect, but I really hope like us or one of our like Western European allies gets there first. Because if Saudi Arabia's like, yo, we got this like super advanced AI, I'm going to go, shit. All that stuff I
Yeah.
said, I didn't mean it. I was joking. Though, you know. Oh, Jesus. But the whole thing I wanted to get to by bringing all of this up is that it's pretty much universally accepted that until we reach a damn near singularity or a human or an AI that can computationally work in a similar way to a human brain as a full neurological network, which is super advanced shit right there.
Right.
We're still going to need people to make the AI. We're going to need people to support them. We're going to need people, and it may still be cheaper. Also, when you think about it, we're working with finite resources here. I doubt we can really afford materialistically to build billions of robots to do all manual labor for places that you can't necessarily build a machine to do it too. So it's not like all the jobs will disappear, but if nothing else, a lot of them will.
Yeah.
I'm surprised cashiers lasted as long as they did. I guess businesses really like that personal touch, man, because I swear to God, I use
Really nice
automated checkout like any chance I get. I don't like people.
Yeah.
Gross breathing meat sacks.
Goddamn emotional cucumbers.
Yeah, cucumber. I like that.
Do you want to take a quick break?
Yeah, let's do that. I know I've said that like twice now, but let's take a break. Headphones
I
are
don't
coming
wanna-
off, so
Yeah, I might talk about the Green New Deal a tiny bit with you too after.
are we talking
Pondering
about the AOC Green New Deal or like the multiple revised sort of kind of Green New Deal that they've been talking
A
about?
little bit of both, because I have sort of mixed opinions on them. So I think
Okay.
it'd be good to talk about. And then I forget what else we were going to talk about.
I don't know, something else. We never talked about Cohen. I don't care about Cohen. He's a
Yeah.
liar. I mean, most of the stuff he said is probably true this time, but I'll never be able to trust him. So
Yeah.
It doesn't make me like Trump any more than I already didn't like him. So
exactly, yeah, pretty
Sure.
inconsequential.
yeah.
So.
All right, I'll be back in a couple minutes.
All right, so that was part 2 over and done with Derek and Brian. We still have one more part to go, so please go ahead and check out part 3. It should be available by the time you're listening this. If not, give it a few minutes if you're a very up-to-date listener. So I'll go ahead and give you guys the same spiel I always do. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. We're available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, I believe SoundCloud, YouTube, iHeartRadio, pretty much anywhere you might want to get a podcast, you can find us there. We have a Facebook page that's available under Liberty After Dark, along with a community group, which you can access by liking the Facebook page and then finding the community group tab. Lots of good stuff there. I post polls and updates and whatnot. If you want to get a hold of me, you can get me at contact@libertyafterdark.net. The website at www.libertyafterdark.net is up and running. However, it's not exactly up to date at this moment, so give me a few days to work on it. I'm still kind of new at this stuff, so I appreciate y'all's patience. Part 3 is coming at you guys very soon, so I won't hold your time anymore. Thank you guys for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the show.